Has your steering wheel suddenly become hard to turn and now it feels like you're fighting your car every time you go around a corner? This is one of those problems drivers notice right away because it completely changes how the vehicle feels on the road. And the dangerous part is that a lot of people assume this only happens when the power steering pump has completely failed, but that is not always true. In many cases, hard steering is actually an early warning sign of other hidden problems in the hydraulic power steering system. And if those problems are ignored, they can turn into a much more expensive repair. In this video, I'm going to explain in a clear, technical, and professional way why hydraulic power steering gets hard, what the most common causes are, how to identify each one, and what the correct fix is in every situation. Because the problem is not always the pump, and replacing parts without a proper diagnosis only wastes time, money, and effort. So stay with me until the end, because here you're going to learn how to diagnose this problem like a professional technician. First, let's understand something very important. A hydraulic power steering system works by using a pump to send pressurized fluid through the steering system, which reduces the amount of effort needed to turn the steering wheel. In simple words, the system helps you steer the front wheels with much less force. When that hydraulic assist becomes weak or disappears completely, the steering wheel gets hard to turn, especially at low speed, while parking, or during tight turns. You may also notice it on the road, but it is usually most obvious when the vehicle is nearly stopped. One of the most common causes of hard steering is a low power steering fluid level. When the system does not have enough fluid, the pump can no longer build proper hydraulic pressure, and the steering assist starts to fail. That is when the wheel begins to feel heavy, stiff, or even inconsistent. But here is the key point. If the fluid level is low, it usually means there's a leak somewhere. That leak could be coming from a hose, a fitting, the pump, the seals, or even the steering rack itself. A lot of people just top off the reservoir and think the problem is solved, but a few days later, the steering gets hard again because the actual leak was never repaired. Another very common cause is a worn drive belt or incorrect belt tension. In many vehicles, the power steering pump is driven by the engine belt. If that belt is loose, worn out, glazed, or if the belt tensioner is weak, the pump will not spin at the right speed. And if the pump is not spinning correctly, hydraulic pressure drops. The result is poor steering assist and a steering wheel that feels harder than normal. In some cases, you may also hear a squealing noise when turning the wheel, especially on a cold start or when steering close to full lock. Now let's talk about a major failure, a worn or damaged power steering pump. The pump is the heart of the hydraulic steering system. If the pump is worn internally, if the vanes are damaged, or if it has been running for too long with low or contaminated fluid, its ability to generate pressure will drop. When that happens, the steering becomes hard, the pump may start whining, and the assist may even come and go. But this is where many people make a mistake. They replace the pump immediately without checking anything else. What they forget is that a pump can fail because of air in the system, fluid contamination, or restrictions in the hydraulic lines. That leads us to another cause many people overlook: air trapped in the system. When air gets into the hydraulic steering system, the fluid becomes foamy and the hydraulic pressure becomes unstable. As a result, the steering may feel hard one moment, normal the next, and then hard again. It is also very common to hear a whining or groaning noise from the pump. If you look inside the reservoir and you see bubbles or foam in the fluid, that is a very strong sign that air is entering the system. In that case, simply adding more fluid is not enough. The system needs to be properly bled, and you also have to find out where the air is getting in. Another important issue is contaminated power steering fluid. If the fluid is old, dirty, dark, or contaminated with metal debris or deteriorated rubber material from the hoses, the system will no longer work properly. The fluid loses its ability to lubricate internal parts and transfer pressure the way it should. This not only makes the steering harder, but also speeds up pump wear, damages internal valves, and can even affect the steering rack. That is why you should never use just any fluid or mix different fluid types. Always use the exact fluid specified for that vehicle and that steering system. We also need to talk about the hydraulic hoses and lines. A pressure or return line can become restricted internally, kinked, or collapsed. When that happens, fluid flow is reduced and steering assist drops. This can also happen if the return hose is clogged or if the reservoir has debris buildup inside. And there's another serious problem that many people miss: internal wear inside the steering rack or steering gear. When there is an internal leak inside the rack, hydraulic pressure is no longer applied correctly, and the system loses assist even when there is no visible external leak. In those cases, the driver may notice that the steering feels heavy, stiff, and sometimes uneven, with one side feeling harder than the other. So, how do you diagnose this problem the right way, like a professional? The correct process starts by checking the fluid level and fluid condition. Then you inspect the system for visible leaks around the pump, hoses, fittings, and steering rack. After that, you check the belt and belt tensioner. Then you look for signs of air in the reservoir, such as bubbles or foam. And if all of that looks normal, the next step is a more advanced diagnosis, checking pump pressure and flow, and also inspecting for line restrictions or internal leakage in the steering rack. That order matters because it prevents you from replacing parts based on guesswork. So, the next time your steering wheel suddenly becomes hard to turn, don't rush to replace the power steering pump without checking the rest of the system first. Sometimes the issue is something simple, like a leak, a slipping belt, or trapped air. But if it is ignored, that simple problem can end up damaging much more expensive components. A proper diagnosis will always cost less than replacing parts through trial and error. And that's the difference between a rushed repair and a truly professional one.